The Zalkiri throne room was built to make visitors feel small. It stretched like a canyon of black stone and silver light, filled with tall banners that shimmered as if alive. The air itself hummed with energy, the heartbeat of an alien empire that had ruled hundreds of worlds. At the far end of the chamber sat Queen Valera, the Unyielding, ruler of the Zalkiri dominion. Her skin glowed faintly blue under the crystalline lights, and her many eyes regarded the human standing before her with cool amusement. The human, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, was a soldier from Earth's Terran Defense Force. His uniform was clean but battle-worn, a reminder that peace had come at a price. He had come as a representative of humanity, sent to speak for a people who had fought, bled, and survived against impossible odds. 2 Zalkiri guards, tall and armored, stood beside him. They were like statues, unmoving, holding energy spears that hummed faintly. Every being in the chamber, advisors, nobles, soldiers, watched him. None had ever seen a human this close before. When the queen finally spoke, her voice was calm but filled with command. "Human," she said, her words translated by the hovering drone beside her. "You stand before the throne of Valera, sovereign of the Zalkiri dominion. You will kneel, as is custom, before the crown." The hall fell silent. Marcus looked at her, tall, proud, regal. He understood the expectation. Every envoy, every alien visitor had knelt before her throne as a sign of respect. To the Zalkiri, to refuse was an insult. But Marcus did not kneel. Instead, he stood straight, his boots planted firm on the shining black floor. His voice was calm, respectful, but unbending. "Your Majesty," he said, "I represent the people of Earth. We bow to no ruler, but we do extend our hand to stand beside those who seek peace as equals." Gasps rippled through the hall. Some of the Queen's advisors hissed in disbelief. One guard even took a step forward, weapon raised, but the Queen lifted her hand, halting him. Her expression did not change, though her eyes sharpened. "You refuse the custom?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "I respect your traditions," he said, "but I can't follow one that means surrender. I'm not here as your servant. I'm here as your ally, and if you'll have one." The Queen rose slowly from her throne. The motion drew attention from everyone in the room. Her voice grew colder. "You stand in my hall surrounded by my soldiers, and yet you speak of equality." Marcus met her gaze without flinching. "Yes, Your Majesty, because peace built on fear won't last, but peace built on respect might." For a long moment no one spoke. The humming energy of the chamber seemed to grow louder. Then the Queen gave a short, sharp laugh. It was not of amusement. It was the kind of laugh that came from disbelief. "You are either brave," she said softly, "or foolish beyond reason." Marcus replied simply, "I've been called both." She studied him for several seconds. Her many eyes reflected his image like a mirror of shifting blue light. She could sense no arrogance in him, only conviction. Finally, she said, "You will remain in the palace until I decide what to do with you." Guards stepped forward, taking position beside him. Marcus did not resist. As they led him away, he turned his head slightly toward the Queen. "For what it's worth," he said, "I didn't come here to fight. I came to understand." The Queen's expression was unreadable as the great doors closed behind him. The cell Marcus was placed in was not what he expected. It wasn't dark or dirty. It was clean, lit with soft blue light and furnished with alien efficiency. Yet it was still a prison. He paced slowly, thinking about what had just happened. His superiors had warned him that the Zalkiri were proud, prideful to the point of blindness. But he hadn't realized how much their pride ruled them. He remembered the war, the endless months of fighting in deep space, humanity holding the line against fleets larger and stronger than anything they had ever seen. The Zalkiri had expected the humans to surrender. They hadn't. They had fought until the Zalkiri asked for peace. Now that same pride stood between peace and another war. Marcus sighed and sat on the strange bed. "If this is diplomacy," he muttered, "I miss the front line." Hours passed before the cell door opened. A guard entered, followed by the Queen herself. Marcus stood at once, instinctively straightening his uniform. He didn't salute. He wasn't sure if that meant anything to her, but he did stand with respect. The Queen's presence filled the small chamber. She was tall, her form graceful and strong, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You truly do not fear me," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus shook his head slightly. Fear doesn't help anyone. Understanding does, she tilted her head. You think you understand me? No, Marcus said honestly. But I'd like to. The Queen's lips curved faintly, though not into a smile. You are strange, human. My people kneel without question. They serve, they obey. It is order. Without it, there is chaos. Maybe, Marcus said, but order without freedom isn't peace. It's silence. That made her pause. For the first time, her eyes softened, only for a moment. Then she said, You speak as if your people know better. Marcus gave a small shrug. We've made our share of mistakes. But we learn. We keep standing back up. That's what humans do best. Valera studied him in silence. She could sense no deceit in his words. His species was young compared to hers, yet his defiance came from something older, a belief in worth that didn't depend on power. Finally, she said, You will remain here. You are not to leave the palace. Marcus nodded. Understood. She turned to go but stopped at the door. Without looking back, she said, You have spirit, human, but spirit alone does not change empires. Marcus's reply was quiet but firm. Maybe not, but it's a start. That night, the Queen stood on her balcony looking down at the glittering city of her capital. She thought about the human, about the way he had stood tall in her hall, surrounded by guards, unarmed and unafraid. No one had ever done that before. To her people, his act was madness. To her, it was something else, something she didn't have a word for. She whispered to herself, The human does not kneel, but neither does he threaten. What kind of strength is that? Below her, the city pulsed with life. Millions of Zalkiri living under her rule. For the first time in her reign, she wondered if they followed her out of loyalty, or simply because they feared her. And somewhere in the palace below, a human soldier sat quietly in his cell, planning how to win peace, not with power, but with conviction. The palace of the Zalkiri Empire was never quiet. Even at night, soft energy lights glowed through crystal walls, and the sound of hovering drones and footsteps filled the endless halls. Yet inside the human cell, all was still. Lieutenant Marcus Hale sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the strange light patterns on the wall. He had been locked inside for almost 2 days. Meals came without a word. Guards never spoke to him. He wasn't beaten or mistreated, just ignored. He knew what was happening. The Queen was testing him. In her own way, she wanted to see how long he could keep his pride before he broke. Marcus smiled slightly to himself. You'll have to try harder than this, he muttered. Humans had survived worse: hunger, cold, fear. A quiet room wasn't going to shake him. On the 3rd day, the cell door opened. 2 guards stepped aside as Queen Valera entered. She didn't come with anger this time. She came with curiosity. Her eyes glowed softly in the dim light, her long robe whispering across the polished floor. Marcus stood, not as a soldier before a ruler, but as a person meeting another person. I was told humans grow restless when confined, the Queen said, her tone light but firm. Marcus gave a half-smile. We do, but we've learned patience too. Comes with being a soldier. Valera tilted her head, studying him. You are not what I expected. When I heard humans were fierce, I thought that meant violent. But you do not strike, you wait. Sometimes waiting takes more courage than fighting, Marcus said. Fighting is simple. Understanding isn't. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. You think you understand me? Marcus shook his head. Not yet. But I'm trying to. There was a pause. The faint hum of palace machinery filled the air. Finally, the Queen gestured for him to follow. Come, you've been kept too long in this cell. You may walk the inner gardens. Under guard, of course, Marcus nodded. Fair enough. The inner gardens of the Zalkiri Palace were breathtaking, glowing trees with crystal leaves, small streams that shimmered with silver water, and creatures that floated like living lights. As Marcus walked beside 2 silent guards, the Queen followed at a distance, her eyes never leaving him. He knelt down beside one of the glowing plants. Its petals opened and closed like breathing. Beautiful, he said softly. Every living thing here, Valera said, was brought from conquered worlds. Each one a symbol of our reach. Marcus looked up at her. Or of what you took. Her eyes flashed at his words, but she didn't reply right away. Instead, she asked, Do humans not take? Do you not conquer? We try not to, Marcus said honestly. But we do fight to survive. There's a difference. The Queen considered his answer. Survival. That word again. Your people fought us to the edge of extinction, yet you refused to surrender. Why? Because freedom matters, Marcus said simply. Because being human means standing even when we're outnumbered. We don't kneel, not because we hate others, but because we value what we are. His voice was calm, but the words carried a weight that made even the alien guards glance at him. Valera's gaze softened slightly. You speak as if you are proud of your weakness. Marcus smiled faintly. We're proud that we turn weakness into strength. The Queen turned away, hiding her thoughts. No one in her court spoke to her like this, no one dared. But this human didn't seem to know fear, or maybe he simply didn't care. Later, the Queen invited him to dine, not as a guest, but as a curiosity. The dining hall was smaller than the throne room, but still grand. Strange floating lights hung above the long table. Food shimmered in alien colors, fruits that glowed, meats that steamed with blue mist. Marcus sat across from the Queen, who watched him carefully as he examined the meal. It's safe for humans, she said. I made sure. Thank you, Marcus replied, cutting a small piece. The flavor was strange, sharp and sweet. Not bad, she lifted a brow. Not bad. That is a dish reserved for the royal line. Marcus shrugged lightly. It's good. But I've had field rations that tasted worse. Food's food. Valera gave a small, genuine laugh. It surprised even her. The sound echoed softly in the quiet hall. You are a strange creature, Marcus Hale. I get that a lot, he said with a grin. For a brief moment, the tension faded. The Queen almost looked curious, even amused, but then her voice turned serious again. You still refuse to kneel. Even now at my table, Marcus looked her in the eye. Because I don't see an enemy here. I see a leader, and leaders don't need others to kneel. They need others to stand with them. Her expression changed, not anger but confusion. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Her rule was built on obedience, on fear. Yet this human's words stirred something deep inside her, something she hadn't felt in years. Doubt. The next morning, the palace buzzed with quiet whispers. Servants spoke of the human who dined with the Queen. Some said she liked him. Others said she was planning to make an example of him. Marcus ignored the talk. He spent the morning observing the palace, not as a prisoner, but as a student. He noticed how the guards avoided eye contact with their superiors, how servants bowed too quickly, how fear seemed woven into every word spoken. When the Queen visited again, Marcus said, Your people are afraid of you. The words stopped her in place. They respect me. They obey you, Marcus said. That's not the same. The Queen's voice grew cold. You speak dangerously, human. I speak truth, Marcus said calmly. You could rule by respect, not fear. But that's your choice, not mine. For the first time, the Queen didn't answer. She turned and left without a word. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked through her private chambers, thinking of the human's words. Respect, not fear. She had ruled for years through command. Her empire was vast, her power unquestioned. But now she realized, if she ordered her people to kneel, they would. But would they stand for her when she truly needed them? She wasn't sure anymore. The next day, a storm of light struck the outer city. Alarms rang through the palace. Marcus, hearing the chaos, rushed to the window of his chamber. He saw a burst of fire in the distance, and not a natural storm, but an attack. Moments later, a guard burst into his room. Stay here, human. Marcus didn't listen. Old instincts took over. He followed the sound of shouting, reaching the grand hall. There he saw the Queen surrounded by her guards, and across from them, a group of armored figures, rebels, Salkiri soldiers who had turned against their own ruler. One shouted, The Queen has grown weak. She listens to the alien. Her reign ends today. Marcus didn't think, he acted. He dashed forward just as one rebel aimed a blaster at her. Down, he shouted, throwing himself between the Queen and the shot. The blast struck his shoulder, spinning him to the floor. Pain flared through him, but he stayed conscious. The guards returned fire, driving the attackers away. When the smoke cleared, the Queen knelt beside him. For once, she was the one kneeling. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you protect me? Marcus looked up at her, breathing hard. Because you're trying to change, and that's worth protecting. Her eyes widened. For the first time in her life, Queen Valera felt something new, gratitude. Later, as healers tended to Marcus's wound, The queen stood alone on her balcony again. She looked out over her city, her mind storming with thoughts. A human, small and fragile by her people's standards, had faced death to protect her, not out of duty, not out of fear, but by choice. It was a lesson she couldn't ignore. The human refuses to kneel, she whispered, but somehow he makes me want to stand taller. And far below, the city glowed in the night, unaware that its queen had begun to change, because of one stubborn human who simply refused to bow. The morning after the attack was silent. Too silent. The Zalkiri palace, usually alive with the hum of energy and footsteps, now felt cold and heavy. The air carried tension like a storm about to break. Servants whispered in corners, guards doubled their patrols, and everyone avoided the queen's gaze. Word had spread fast. The queen had been attacked by her own soldiers. And worse, she had been saved by a human. In the grand hall, Queen Valera stood beside the great window that overlooked her city. Her hands were clasped behind her back, her expression calm, but her mind burned with unease. She had ruled through control her entire life. Fear had always been her armor. But now that armor was cracking, and the cause of that crack was resting in the medical chamber below her, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the human who refused to kneel. Marcus lay on the narrow healing bed, his shoulder bandaged with a glowing wrap that pulsed faintly. The alien medicine worked fast. The pain was fading already. He stared at the ceiling, remembering the moment he had leapt in front of the queen. He hadn't thought. He'd just acted. That's what soldiers did when others were in danger. He didn't care about rank or power. Saving lives was simple. The door slid open softly. He turned his head to see the queen step in, her long robe flowing like liquid silver in the light. "You should be resting," she said. Marcus smiled slightly. "You should have better guards." A faint laugh escaped her, soft and real, not the sharp, proud laugh she used in the throne room. "Perhaps," she said. "But I had you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't exactly part of the security plan. Yet you saved me," she replied. "Even after I had you locked away." He sat up slowly, wincing a little. "Didn't do it for you personally, Your Majesty. Did it because it was right?" Her eyes watched him carefully. "Right," she repeated. "That word means much to you, doesn't it?" "It should mean something to everyone," Marcus said simply. "Without it, power means nothing." She nodded slowly. "You risked your life for a ruler you claim not to serve." "You confuse me, human." Marcus gave a small grin. "Good. Confusion means you're thinking." The queen gave him a long, searching look, one that carried both admiration and unease. Later that day, the queen summoned her council. The room filled with alien nobles, all wearing elegant robes and sharp expressions. They bowed deeply as she entered, but she could feel the hidden tension behind their gestures. "The rebels who attacked me," she said, her voice clear, "will be found and punished. But I want to know, why did they turn against me?" Silence filled the chamber. No one spoke. No one dared. Finally, one old advisor stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the people whisper that you have changed, that the human has clouded your judgment." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Clouded?" "Yes," the advisor said nervously. "They say you allow him freedom, that you speak to him as if he were your equal." The queen's voice turned sharp. "He saved my life. Is that not worth respect?" Murmurs spread among the council. One younger noble said, "Respect is one thing, Majesty, but he is not one of us. To show him such favor invites weakness." Valera's gaze swept the room. "Weakness," she repeated softly. "The man who faced death without fear. That is weakness to you?" The nobles fell silent. The queen stood tall. "If my empire cannot see courage for what it is, then perhaps it is not the human who confuses us, but ourselves." That night, Marcus stood on the balcony of his chamber, looking out at the alien city. From this height it looked peaceful. Rivers of light, silver towers, glowing bridges. But he knew peace built on fear never lasted. He could see small groups of citizens below, gathering, talking. He didn't know their words, but he could sense the tension. The attack on the queen had stirred something in the people. Then he heard a soft voice behind him. "You see it too," he turned. The queen stood there again without her crown, just wearing a simple cloak. She looked less like a ruler and more like a person. "They're afraid," Marcus said quietly. "Afraid of losing control," she said. Afraid of change, Marcus nodded. That's normal. Change always scares people. But fear isn't forever. Once they see a better way, they'll follow it. The Queen looked down at the glowing city. And what do you think is a better way, human? Marcus turned to her. A ruler people love and not one they fear. She smiled faintly. You think I can become that? I think anyone can, he said. But you have to want it. For a long time they stood there in silence, the wind carrying the faint hum of the city below. Then the Queen said softly, You speak as if you care for my people. Marcus looked at her. I do. They remind me of us, trying to be strong, trying to survive. They deserve better. Her expression softened. You risk your life for those not your own. Why? Marcus smiled. Because doing the right thing isn't about who they are. It's about who we are. Days passed. The Queen began making small changes in the palace, changes that shocked her advisors. She ordered that servants could speak without kneeling. She removed harsh punishments for minor mistakes. She even allowed citizens to petition the court directly, something no ruler before her had done. And always in the shadows of the Great Hall, people whispered the same thing. The human did this. The story of Marcus Hale spread beyond the palace, to the streets, the markets, the space docks. They called him the Unbowed One. Some said he was dangerous, that he was changing their queen. Others said he was a hero, a symbol of courage and hope. And somewhere, hidden among the outer districts, the rebels who had attacked the queen began to fear that their uprising had backfired. They had wanted to destroy the throne. Instead, they had helped her become stronger. One evening, while Marcus was walking through the palace courtyard, he noticed something strange. A small group of young Zalkiri soldiers stood watching him. When he met their eyes, they didn't bow or sneer. They saluted. One of them stepped forward. Human, he said in a rough accent. You saved the queen, you saved our honor, Thank you. Marcus was surprised, but he smiled. You don't need to thank me. Just do the same for others. The young soldier nodded. We will. We've learned from you. As they left, Marcus realized something important. Ideas were spreading faster than commands. The queen wasn't just changing. Her people were too. But not everyone welcomed that change. Far beyond the city, deep inside the shadowed moons of the Dominion, rebel leaders gathered again. They spoke of fear, of how the queen was being corrupted by the human. She is no longer one of us, one said. The human has filled her mind with weakness, another replied darkly. Then we remove them both. Back in the palace, Valera sat alone in her private chamber. She stared at her reflection in the glass. Once she had worn her crown like a shield. Now she wore it like a burden. She remembered the human's words. Peace built on fear won't last, but peace built on respect might. She closed her eyes and whispered, Respect. I finally understand. When she opened them again, she saw her own face, not as a ruler, but as a leader ready to change. Later that night, she found Marcus standing in the garden, looking up at the alien stars. Your people are changing, he said. I know, she replied softly, and it frightens me. Good, Marcus said with a grin. That means it's real. She laughed quietly, then looked at him seriously. There are those who still want me gone, who want you gone. They won't stop. Marcus looked back at her. Then we don't stop either. They stood there beneath the glowing trees, a human and an alien queen, side by side, and above them, unseen, the first sparks of a greater rebellion began to spread across the empire. The palace of the Zalkiri was tense like never before. Even at dawn, the glow from the crystal towers seemed sharper, colder, reflecting the unrest that simmered through the halls. Word of the human's courage and the minor rebellions had reached every corner of the capital. Some hailed him as a hero, others whispered his name in anger, calling him a dangerous influence. Queen Valera walked the corridors in silence. Her many eyes scanned the halls, noting the subtle shifts in her people's behavior. Servants who had previously bowed without looking now dared to glance up, whispering softly as they passed. Guards who had once stood rigid now exchanged cautious nods among themselves. Even her advisors, usually so composed and unwavering, seemed nervous and uncertain. Valera knew why. They had seen her favor the human. They had heard his words. And most dangerous of all, they had seen the courage he inspired. She had expected fear to rule the palace, that obedience alone would maintain order. But now, in the quiet moments, she realized that respect had begun to take root, quietly, stubbornly, in ways she had never imagined. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale had been allowed more freedom within the palace. No longer confined to his chamber, he was now able to walk in the inner gardens under watch but without chains. He moved carefully, mindful of his role as a guest and representative. As he passed through the glowing pathways one evening, the Queen appeared before him. She stood tall, her posture regal yet less rigid than before. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm but carrying a weight of thought, "you have changed more than you know." Marcus tilted his head. "I hope I've changed things for the better." Valera studied him closely. "You speak of peace built on respect, and yet there are those who wish to see the opposite. They plot against me, and against you." Marcus's expression was serious. "Then we have to be ready. But we don't fight alone. You have your people. You only need to let them see the truth." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I can win them over?" "I know you can," he said simply. "You've already started. Look at them. Look at yourself. You've begun to see things differently." That night the rebellion struck again. This time it was not a small group. Armed Zalkiri soldiers, loyal to the old ways, gathered in secret in the palace outskirts. Their goal was clear: remove the Queen and the human who had so disrupted their plans. Alarms rang through the palace. The lights dimmed and flared as guards scrambled to defend the throne. Marcus, hearing the commotion, raced through the corridors toward the Grand Hall. Queen Valera waited there, flanked by her most loyal soldiers. But the soldiers were fewer than the attackers, and their confidence wavered. The rebels were armed, determined, and ruthless. "Marcus," she said, her voice steady despite the tension, "I cannot fight this battle alone. My people, I fear they may not obey." Marcus shook his head. "You don't fight alone, you lead. And a leader's strength comes from showing courage, not just giving orders." Valera's many eyes reflected his determination. For the first time she felt fear, real fear, not for herself but for the consequences of her decision. Then she remembered the human who had risked his life for her without hesitation. If he could stand, so could she. The first wave of rebels reached the Grand Hall. Energy weapons flared, sparks danced across the walls, and the sound of conflict echoed like thunder. Marcus moved with precision, blocking attacks where he could and helping loyal guards defend the Queen. Despite his size and strength, he relied on skill, speed, and careful timing rather than sheer force. Valera stepped forward, raising her own energy shield. She had never fought alongside anyone like this before. Every command she gave was precise, every motion deliberate. She moved not as a ruler separated from her soldiers, but as a leader among them. Her people hesitated at first, unsure whether to follow or flee. But when they saw her courage and the human fighting at her side, something changed. Slowly, more soldiers joined the defense, inspired by the determination they had only glimpsed through whispered rumors and rumors made real. The tide of battle shifted. Rebels who had expected fear and hesitation now faced a queen who refused to yield, and a human who had already proven that courage was not limited by species. In the midst of the chaos, a rebel leader aimed his weapon directly at the queen. Time seemed to slow. Marcus reacted instantly, diving between them. A pulse of energy grazed his side, but he stayed upright, shielding the queen. Valera's eyes widened, then narrowed. She realized that the moment had come. The choice she had been avoiding. The rebels had expected her to flee, to hide behind walls and intimidation. But if she truly wanted change, if she wanted respect rather than fear, she had to stand openly, visibly, without relying solely on Marcus. She stepped forward, raising her hand to call for all attacks to stop. A bright pulse of light shot from her crown, not to harm but to signal a ceasefire. "Stop," she commanded. Her voice echoed throughout the hall. "You will no longer fight me because I fear you. You will no longer attack me because of old traditions. We are not enemies." The rebels faltered. Their weapons wavered. The hall fell silent. Marcus glanced at her in surprise. This was the moment he had hoped for. Valera continued, her voice strong, carrying through the chamber. "From this moment, my people will choose whom they follow. Obedience without loyalty is empty. Fear without respect is meaningless. Those who stand with me shall do so because they believe in me, not because they are afraid of me." The words hit the soldiers like a thunderclap. Many dropped their weapons, realizing the futility of rebellion. Others hesitated, torn between old loyalty and the new example of courage. When the dust settled, Marcus turned to the Queen. "You did it," he said softly. Valera nodded. "No," she said. "We did it. You showed me the way. You taught me that standing side by side with others is stronger than ruling over them with fear." Marcus smiled. "It's what humans do best. We stand when others expect us to bow. But we don't do it alone. We rise together." The Queen looked at him, a new understanding in her gaze. For centuries, she had been alone in her rule. Now she realized she didn't have to be. She could be stronger by sharing strength, by trusting, by showing courage. In that moment, a small group of rebels knelt. Not in submission, but in acknowledgement. They had seen leadership beyond force, beyond fear, and they chose to follow. The victory was not complete. Some rebels remained, hiding in the outer districts, plotting still. But the palace itself had changed. The Queen's choice had sparked a shift, a ripple that would continue to grow. Valera walked through the hall, her crown no longer a symbol of command alone, but a symbol of resolve and courage. Marcus followed her, unbowed and unafraid. Side by side, they looked out over the city, the glow of lights reflecting in their eyes. "You changed more than just me," the Queen said quietly. "And you changed more than just the palace," Marcus replied. "You showed your people what courage looks like. That's how change spreads, through example, not fear." Valera smiled faintly. "Then perhaps there is hope for both our people, human." Marcus nodded. "There always is if we stand together." As the city slept beneath the alien stars, the palace no longer seemed like a place of fear. It was alive with possibility. The people were watching, learning, and beginning to believe in something new, in courage, in honor, in the power of choice. And in the center of it all stood a queen who had chosen to be brave, and a human who refused to kneel, proving that true leadership was not inherited, but earned, and that courage could inspire an empire to rise. The sun rose over the Zalkiri capital like a ribbon of silver and gold, lighting up the towers, gardens, and crystal bridges with a brilliance that made the city appear alive. For the first time in many years, the streets felt calm, not because fear ruled them, but because something new was growing. Hope. Queen Valera stood on the balcony of her palace overlooking the city. She was no longer just a ruler who demanded obedience. She had chosen a different path, one guided by respect, courage, and understanding. Beside her, unbowed and alert, stood Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the human soldier who had refused to kneel before her throne. The city below was beginning to stir. Citizens went about their morning, whispering excitedly about the changes in the palace. Soldiers who had once hesitated now marched confidently, following orders not out of fear, but because they believed in the leadership that had saved their queen and shown them the value of courage. Inside the palace, the council of nobles gathered. They were no longer the stiff, fearful advisors who had quivered at every word of the queen. The humans' influence, through example not command, had shaken their old assumptions. They now debated openly, offering ideas for new policies, new ways to improve the empire, and ways to work alongside humans for mutual benefit. Valera observed quietly, noting the change in tone, in demeanor, in spirit. It was subtle but unmistakable. Her people were beginning to think for themselves, and in doing so, they were learning the meaning of loyalty born from respect rather than fear. She turned to Marcus, who had been watching the discussion with quiet interest. "They are different now," she said. "Not everyone will change overnight, but they will follow courage when they see it, not when they are forced to." Marcus smiled. "That's how humans lead, Your Majesty. We show, not force. We inspire, not command. You've done the same." Valera nodded, feeling a rare warmth in her chest. "And all because you refused to kneel." Marcus chuckled softly. Someone had to start the change. Over the following weeks, the Zalkiri capital began to shift in ways no one had imagined possible. Rebel groups, seeing the Queen's new approach and the growing unity of her people, laid down their weapons one by one. They approached the palace not as enemies, but as citizens seeking understanding. One young soldier, who had once fought against Valera's rule, knelt before her. not in submission but as a gesture of acknowledgement. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I see now that strength is not in fear. It is in courage and choice." The Queen looked at him steadily. "Then rise," she said, "and stand with us if you wish." He rose, and for the first time a human and a Zalkiri soldier could have shared the same ground as equals. Marcus walked through the palace halls, observing the changes. Guards spoke more openly to each other. Servants moved with a sense of purpose rather than fear, and everywhere citizens whispered of the human who had changed the Queen, not with weapons, but with courage, respect, and an unyielding refusal to bow. He paused at a balcony overlooking the central plaza. Below, a crowd had gathered to hear the Queen speak. Valera's voice rang clearly through the city. "From this day forward, the Zalkiri Dominion will be guided not by fear but by respect. We will honor courage, value loyalty freely given, and seek alliances with those who wish for peace. Those who stand with us do so by choice, not by command. This is the dawn of a new era." The crowd erupted in cheers. Citizens raised their hands not in forced submission but in celebration. Marcus felt a swell of pride. Humanity had planted a seed here, and now it was growing, stronger and more vibrant than he had imagined. Later that day, Valera invited Marcus to the royal chamber. She stood by the great window, watching the sun reflect off the crystal towers. "You have done more than I could have imagined," she said softly. Marcus shook his head. "You did it. I only showed the way. You made the choice." Her eyes reflected both pride and relief. "It is not easy to change an empire. It requires courage not just from the ruler, but from the people, and yet it has begun." Marcus smiled. "Sometimes all it takes is one step. One act of courage. One refusal to bow." Valera nodded. "Then we walk forward together." The Queen decided to formalize a new alliance with humanity. A ceremony was held in the palace plaza, a gathering that included human envoys, Zalkiri nobles, soldiers, and citizens. The symbolism was clear. No throne would be elevated above the crowd. No one would kneel, and all would stand together in mutual respect. Marcus stood at Valera's side as she spoke to the assembled people. "Today we celebrate not victory but choice, not obedience but respect. We stand together as equals, human and Zalkiri, learning from each other, sharing strength and building a future together." The crowd erupted in unified cheers. People of all ages, species, and roles lifted their hands in solidarity. It was a moment unlike any other in the history of the Dominion, a new beginning that honored both courage and freedom. In the weeks that followed, the two leaders worked side by side. Policies were rewritten to favor justice over fear, education over blind obedience, and collaboration over coercion. Human advisors offered insights, not commands. Zalkiri citizens offered ideas, not compliance. The changes spread beyond the capital. Other planets in the Dominion began adopting similar reforms. Rebels who had once plotted in the shadows now became active participants in governance. Fear was replaced by respect, suspicion by trust, and obedience by choice. Marcus often walked through the city, observing the new energy. Children played safely in the streets. Merchants smiled openly. Soldiers trained together not to dominate but to protect. Every small act of courage and kindness created ripples of hope. One evening, as the twin suns set over the horizon, Valera and Marcus stood together on a high terrace. "You see how far we've come?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with wonder. Marcus nodded. "It's amazing. You did all of this." "No," she said, "we did it, together. Your courage gave me the strength to change, and now my people see the value of that choice. That is something no one ruler could do alone." They looked out at the glowing city, bathed in the warm light of the setting suns. The towers shimmered, the streets glimmered, and for the first time, the Zalkiri capital felt alive in a way it never had before. Vibrant, hopeful, united. Marcus turned to the Queen. "You've built something incredible here. An empire where people can stand together, not because they have to, but because they want to." Valera smiled faintly, a soft expression she had rarely shown. And it all started because one human refused to kneel. From that day forward, the story of Marcus Hale spread throughout the galaxy. Humans were remembered not just as fierce soldiers, but as beings of courage, wisdom, and unyielding spirit. The Zalkiri learned that strength could be measured not by fear, but by respect and bravery. In time, Other empires and civilizations looked to the example set by humanity and the Queen. The story of how a single act of courage could inspire an entire species to rise above fear and embrace honor. And so, the human who had refused to kneel became a legend, not for battle victories, not for conquest, but for teaching an empire the meaning of courage, choice, and equality. Queen Valera, once known as unyielding and feared, became a leader revered not just for her power but for her wisdom, her fairness, and her willingness to change. Marcus Hale returned to his own people eventually, but the bond he had forged with the Queen and her people remained unbroken. Across the stars, humans and Zalkiri worked together side by side, building a new era, one of hope, equality, and courage. And in every corner of the galaxy where fear had once ruled, whispers could be heard. Stand tall. Choose courage. Refuse to bow. And perhaps, like Marcus, you can change the world.